Today's sermon is titled Quality of Mercy, to be delivered by Marianne Anderson. Marianne Anderson is a seeker, one whose search for meaning and truth has led her into many different places of worship: the church, the temple, the mosque, the sweat lodge, and nature. She believes that good and bad are an integral part of the human experience, and that every choice we make has consequences, from what we do and say to how we conduct ourselves in life. She believes in kindness, and that if practiced diligently, it will lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and others, and that mercy is one of the greatest qualities needed in order to bring about peace, not only temporal peace, but inner peace. I give you Marianne.
Thank you, Judy. Good morning, all. First, I want to thank you for coming today and thank our Unitarian Universalist community for spreading words like the words we're talking about today, as well as others. But let's begin with the opening lines from the first reading. Portia is pleading to Shylock, the moneylender, for mercy. He demanded a pound of flesh from Antonio if he were to default on a loan, and sure enough, Antonio couldn't pay. So what did Portia do? Well, she disguised herself as a male lawyer, and went to court and made her plea. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. Well, many of you are probably familiar with this speech, at least the first few lines. So the question is, what exactly is mercy? Does it have a certain quality or qualities? Is it the same as forgiveness? Or are there maybe some deeper reflections and meanings to consider? It's an intricate web of definitions and hard to sort out, but I'll do my best today. Portia's speech continues with, "It is an attribute of God himself, and earthly power doth then show likest God's when mercy seasons justice." When mercy seasons justice, that's very difficult to grasp, I'm sure, for some people. Well, how do these two seemingly opposite qualities interact? Looks like we're dealing with a major conundrum here, or are we? To quote Abraham Lincoln, "I have always found that mercy bears richer fruits than justice." But what about justice? How do we balance these two qualities? Here there was a man who took in his sister-in-law, Elizabeth Todd Edwards, after her husband was killed fighting for the South. And a man who issued a proclamation of amnesty to the South in 1863, before the end of the war, because he believed that the only way for the South to rebuild was if they had the permission and the proper guidance to do so. And this proclamation offered full pardons to all of the soldiers, except the officials and the military leaders. It was rejected. Now to the Bible, a somewhat delicate resource, but it is from the Old Testament, so bear with me. Deuteronomy chapter 42 has quite a different take on justice. "I will make my arrows drunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, the heads of the enemy leaders." Oh boy. And 43, "Rejoice, you nations, with its people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will take vengeance on his enemies and make atonement for his land and people." Uh-oh. We've got a problem here. How does one practice mercy when justice or vengeance is waiting in the wings? And are these two words even related, or can they practically coexist? Let's delve a little deeper into this issue and this conundrum. The weak can never forgive, Forgiveness is the virtue of the brave. So said Gandhi. After several attempts to assassinate him by Nathuram Virayak Godse, the very person who eventually succeeded in doing so in 1948. Did you know that Gandhi never pressed charges in the first two attempts? Wait a minute. He never pressed charges on the man who would eventually kill him at point blank range. How did Godse manage even to get so close? And how does this make any sense? It's really hard to fathom, but Gandhi also stated from his true pacifistic heart, I believe in the message of truth delivered by all the religious teachers of the world. And it is my constant prayer that I may never have a feeling of anger against my traducers, that even if I fall victim to an assassin's bullet, I may deliver up my soul with the remembrance of God upon my lips. I shall be content to be written down an impostor if my lips utter a word of anger or abuse against my assailant at the last moment. And that he did. Then again, Psalm 23:6 states in Davis' words, surely, you know this one, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I have a very dear friend who was critically abused by her husband. She was very, very upset and couldn't figure out how to find some forgiveness. She was in deep despair, greatly upset. So she went to her, I think it was his Episcopalian minister, and she said, how do I deal with this? Well, he reminded her in Christian terms that as Jesus was nailed to the cross and was dying, his last words were, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, was this because those people who crucified Christ were ignorant of the kangaroo court that had convicted him? Perhaps. Maybe they believed that he deserved it. Or perhaps because Jesus felt that being still in human form, he relied on Father God, who is the omnipotent divine, who has it in his power to forgive, that we as human beings do not have it in our power or our ability. It's something more to ponder here. Either way, my friend was very consoled by that. Funny, she said, how easy it was to let go, knowing that the decision to forgive was not in my power, but in God's power alone. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the new film called Women Talking. I know it was shared in the men's group. And it's a very delicate, difficult film to deal with about the ravaging of young girls by the men in their Mennonite colony and what to do about it. It's a tremendous discourse on forgiveness and justice, and I highly recommend watching this film. Well, for those of you who follow the Christian way, this all might be easy to understand and digest and accept. There are others, though. There are other ways of believing. An atheist friend of mine told me she took a different position on the word mercy. She says that it's something earned by experience, the experience of pain and even persecution, and that suffering leads to compassion, an important component of mercy. Now let's take a look at some of the differences between the Eastern and Western ideology as pertains to mercy. Excuse me just one second. And who represents these qualities? Did I jump ahead? Yeah, there we go. This is from the University of Dayton Marian Library, the Mother of Mercy. To enter into fruitful religious dialogue with Buddhism, experts in Asian theology advise to highlight mercy and passion. These two themes are representative of the Buddhist doctrine. As Jesus died for the sins of man, Buddha suffered ascetically in order to free people from the pains of earthly existence. It blends into one, Mary, Mother of Mercy, and Guanyin or Guan'um. In China and Korea, she was represented in the feminine form and is venerated as a gentle and compassionate Madonna. She is described as a model of mercy and may be compared to Mary, Mother of Jesus, Mother of Mercy. Like Mary, she dedicates her personal mission to mercy as Mother of everyone. She is frequently depicted, as you can see here, with a child in her arms, riding a dragon, and placed in front of waterfalls or on rocks. She leads sailors to safety. Now, this artist added two little angels to give the sculpture a more pronounced Christian character. There are, of course, differences between Guanyin and Mary. Guanyin is not a historical person. Legend describes her as a princess, Miao Chun. As idealized woman, she personifies the Buddha in Mahayana Buddhism, but she is not a goddess, just as Mary should not be mistaken with a feminine face of God, although some do. Guanyin is the bodhisattva among many other bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas are enlightened beings who choose to stay on earth as examples, accessible examples for Buddhist faith to follow. Her mission is mercy, and she leads to nirvana, just as Mary's mercy leads to the cross, the source and reason of God's mercy. Now here comes another big challenge. Are mercy and forgiveness the same thing? How does one forgive acts of cruelty and evil, such as the Sandy Hook massacre or the Emmanuel Church in Charleston? And what about the Holocaust? Well, most of those people who forgave were motivated by one major factor, their faith. May God have mercy on your soul, one of the church members said. Let us remember also the story about Jesus on the cross. And then there's the mother of Sandy Hook victim who said, on a personal level, it is impossible to imagine being able to heal from the devastation of kneeling on the frozen earth beside your baby's grave. But she went on to say, surrendering debt takes time and does not mean forgetting. Forgiveness releases another from the debt you feel owed and gives your heart permission to heal rather than keep score, and has more to do with us than them. And I'd like to invite Ames up again to do another song called Sweet Forgiveness.
I want to thank Ames for joining us today. He's a little camera shy, but
it's my birthday.
and he's playing the dobro, which is, I'm sure many of you might know what it is. You want to say what that is?
Yeah, this is Do's Bro. No, it's an acoustic guitar developed by the Dopera brothers in the 30s with a resonator and some speakers to make it a really loud acoustic instrument to compete with big horns and stuff in the orchestras. So, but then they raise a nut here, and so you can sort of slide it with a bar versus play it like a guitar. So it's
musical aside to lighten up the content of this. Sweet forgiveness, that's what you give to me when you hold me close and you say that's all over. You don't go looking back, you don't hold the cards to stack, 'cause you mean what you say. Sweet forgiveness, deserve. Taste of this kind of love, someone who will hold your hand, whisper I understand, and I still love
Part two. Or should I say act two? Let us now return to the subject of mercy as in the 7 corporal works of mercy, and see, interestingly, how parallel these qualities are with our UU principles. As you can see here, Caritas, the 7 acts of mercy, a pen and ink drawing by Peter Bruegel the Elder in 1559. We're going anti-clockwise, starting at the bottom right. 1, feed the hungry. In my opinion, there are too many children in our very country who aren't getting proper nutrition, and this is a travesty. It's either school lunches filled with carbs, or there's not enough food at home, in the home. Yeah, we have food banks, we have food pantries that are often emptied out before they're even stocked. And we now we have people here who drive, and people even in our community who are food insecure. I always ask myself the same question when I see an abuse of money in the form of personal possessions, $5,000 handbags. I say, how many school lunches would that provide? It's my bottom line question. Number 2, give drink to the thirsty. Thirst is a word that can have several applications. You have thirst for water, of course, the basic need for survival. But there's thirst for information, thirst for safety, thirst for freedom. Quench the thirst in the best way you can. Help others, however possible, to survive in an arid world. And for heaven's sake, let's try to make this planet free of drought from the climate change we're living in. 3, ransom the captive. So many people are wrongfully accused and remain in prisons here and all over the world. I mean, look here in our own country at the Innocence Project, founded ironically by Barry Scheck, who was one of the defenders in the O.J. Simpson trial. Maybe he's trying to work off some karma here. 3, bury the dead. There are various methods of burial through the Western rituals of cemetery burials, cremation, Neptune society, or even now planting one's remains in pods that will become trees. In ancient China, for many years, there were forests where people's remains, the cremated remains, would do that. They would put them in pods and make trees, and children could go visit their grandma in the forest by sitting next to the tree. 5, shelter the stranger. There's so many ways to provide. I mean, look around and see the abundance of land and opportunity we have here. And thank you, Jimmy Carter, for making us aware of the fact that there are solutions. We just need to implement them. You know, provide safe, affordable housing to many who have lost their livelihoods, either through economic duress, through medical, financial ruin, for different ways, maybe even unknown to us. You know, in India, it is common practice that there is a door left ajar, and that when a traveler is coming to your home, you take this traveler in and you feed this traveler, and you give this person, usually it's a swami or a person of religious background, and you feed them. It's just what you do. 6, comfort the sick. Oh boy. Now, sometimes to me, that feels like a very tall order. I'm such an empath. I mean, you heard, I cry at the Hallmark commercials. Now, I went to see a friend in the hospital, and I just froze before I went inside. I thought, I don't know if I can do this. It was so difficult for me as a person. And the minute I walked in there and I saw the smile on her face, I realized it was so worth it, so worth it. You know, I mean, Dolores here mentioned, you know, let's keep in touch with Mary Del Bono, with people who need things. I mean, look how grateful Anita is for the people who help her out. These are UU principles in action, in action. 7, clothe the naked. All kinds of ways to get clothing. You know, there's an old food bin down in town one time, I remember, where you could drop off your clothes. There's also the Vineyard Church that has a thrift shop here. We love those thrift shops. They're affordable, but they're also affordable for people who need clothing. You know, I remember a year or so ago when we had the fires up north, our very own Kat Lekich here was involved in the drive to bring clothing and necessities to the fire victims up north. So thank you, Kat, for all your efforts. So the more I researched, the more qualities of mercy I found. Interestingly enough, one of them had to do with forgiveness. I found it in the 7 spiritual works of mercy espoused by the Catholic Church for ages. It's more spiritually driven, but it does demonstrate how important mercy is and has been throughout history. Let's take a moment to regard these. And I want you to know that this was done in 1504, the 7 works of mercy. It's in Amsterdam in the Rijksmuseum. 1, to instruct the ignorant. Remember the phrase, teach peace? Or remember that song from King and I, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. Well, this suggests teaching by example also. Like Martin Luther King Peace Poem Project that our friend over in Maui, Melinda Gahn, has developed and worked on for the past 20 years. And some of those children who were involved in the first Peace Poem Project are now parents of children in the Peace Poem Project. So we are teaching peace. To counsel the doubtful, engage in conversation and listen. Listen to what others have to say or ask. Give them a chance to express their doubts without judgment or rebuttal. 3, to admonish the sinners. Try your best to let them know what they have done is harmful. Make them aware of their transgressions. This is a difficult task, probably the most difficult. Choose your words carefully here. I did this with my father shortly before he died. And I'm so glad I was able to do this, muster up the courage to do this, because it finally gave me closure. 4, to bear patiently those who wrong us. Ow. Leave pride out of the equation, turn the other cheek. Hard to do, and it's even tremendously more difficult when it has to do with violations of those we love and our children. Watch that movie. 5, to forgive offenses. As mentioned before, some crimes are perhaps unforgivable, yet there are some people like the Sandy Hook mother and the churchgoers in Charleston who manage through their faith to do so. 6, to comfort the afflicted. True story. The day my father passed, I felt I was disconsolate. I went up to the church and I was looking for the priest or somebody to speak to get solace from, and nobody paid me any attention. And I waited and I was still there alone, left alone. So I went outside the church and I sat on some stone steps just to pray by myself. And a woman I didn't know, never seen before, came up, sat down next to me and sat with me. Didn't say a word, didn't introduce herself, didn't ruffle around or anything. She just sat with me. And after about maybe 10 minutes, she put her arm around my shoulder and then she got up and walked away. To me, that was one of the most beautiful expressions of compassion that I have ever experienced in my life. 7, to pray for the living and the dead. I once heard a talk called Go to the Funeral. It does make a big difference to the family and loved ones and those who cared about it, this person. And it also connects you to a higher source of solace. Your presence matters. So how does one really truly define the quality of mercy? As you've heard, practicing this quality might be a lesson in sainthood, but better yet, it's something to strive for, no matter how difficult the task. You can easily see how close these qualities reflect our UU principles. To me, mercy is like yeast that rises slowly with the warmth of an oven. It is like water that finds its way to the sea. It's like fire that can provide light and warmth. All around the world, we find the importance of the quality of mercy in practice. Through centuries, it's played an important role in society as well as religion, not to mention literature. But I've really enjoyed delving deeply into this subject and have learned quite a lot about it and about myself. And I recommend further discussion on this extraordinary topic. I'd love to listen to your comments after this service, and I thank you for your time and for my ability to share my interpretation with you today. Thank you.